Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and in this flight we're going to put the simulator through its paces in the Cessna Citation Longitude, so stick around guys because hopefully this is going to be a good one. If you are interested in acquiring my Overkill's Cessna Citation Longitude guide from Microsoft Flight Simulator, consider joining my Patreon site at level tier 2 or above. That's $10 or more, which will give you access to all of the Overkill tutorial guides. Please keep in mind with Patreon, you do not have to subscribe each and every month. Once you subscribe, you will be charged $10. You will have access to all of the guides, and if you wish, you can then cancel the subscription, and you will maintain access to Patreon until the first of the following month. So, with that in mind, let's talk about what this guide is. This guide gives you a full flight tutorial from Boston to Minneapolis. It also walks you through installing any modifications that I use for this aircraft, a full cockpit tutorial, breaking down how to create your flight plan using Simbrief, which is a free service, and then completing the flight successfully. If there are any questions, you're always welcome to give feedback, as joining my Patreon site gives you access to my Discord channel as well, giving you direct access and communication to me. So once again, if you guys are interested, please consider joining the Patreon. It definitely helps support the channel and keeps the content coming, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Alright, so getting into our flight today, we are in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we're going to be flying down to Tucson. I always fly away from my home, never actually fly back to it, so I thought it might be kind of fun. Now, the reason why we're picking the longitude is because the longitude's cruise altitude is typically in the excess of 40,000 feet. So I figured this is a really good way to put the simulator through its paces and find out what's been resolved, what hasn't. Now, just to emphasize something, no more complaining, no more pissing and moaning. You know, I'm at least from me, I'm going to do my best to deal with any issues that come up along the flight. If we start having issues at high altitude, we're going to bring her down into a controllable altitude and just do some of that pilot crap and fly our plane the best we can, and come up with any resolutions that I can. For those of you who are still struggling with certain issues, I am still diving into it. I'm still testing things left and right. Like I said, I'm not going to do any more pissing and moaning, complaining, or whining, but I will definitely still be offering any solutions or ideas that might produce a solution as they come up. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get into the flight planning for today's flight. All right, so we're going to bring Simbrief on over here. I'm not worried about the airline. We're not worried about the flight number today. However, we are worried about our departure. KSLC for Salt Lake City, Utah, and coming down to Kilo Tango Uniform Sierra for Tucson with an alternate route of Phoenix. Now, forgive the mouse stuttering. It always does this when I put something over Microsoft Flight Simulator. C700 longitude is what we are looking for our airframe. Unit, yep, we want in pounds. Continuous or reserve fuel, we're looking for 45 minutes. And cruise speed, Mach 0.82, although we'll see what happens. Sometimes I can hit it, sometimes I can't. Departing from runway 16 right today, expecting 29er right for the arrival. Very common for Tucson. Not going to worry about any extra fuel aside from the reserves that we already have in the plan. And we have our route today. That almost looks like direct to an airway. I don't think that's a SID, so we'll see what that looks like here when it comes time to do our FMS entries. And then we're coming in on the Dingo 5-star. So let's go ahead and come up to the top. Tap our Generate OFP button, Operational Flight Plan. And this is the part where we wait. All right, let's go print preview PDF. I'm going to close Simbrief here. I'm going to drag this off the screen. That way it's a little bit easier to manage. And now let's get into our pre-flight checklist and get the aircraft loaded and fueled, and then we'll start turning things on. All right, and real quick, guys, as we start getting into loading things up, I have, in the past couple videos with the longitude, I have seen people complain about me talking too fast. Guys, I want you guys to real quick just understand, I get both sides. I'm either going too fast or I'm going too slow. That's why I try to do these tutorials on YouTube as thorough as possible. So at the very least, you're able to pause and back them up and hopefully catch the things that need. Again, if you're interested, please join my Patreon site. There is the Cessna Citation Longitude PDF tutorial guide, which basically follows through all the same steps that I'm going through here today. So hopefully all that can help, but I just want to let you know I do hear you guys. It's just I've got some of you say one thing, some of you say the other, so I do the best I can to meet you in the middle. So hopefully I don't go too fast today, but let's go ahead and get started. Now I am going to be, again, trying to keep this a full flight tutorial, so I'm going to show you guys where I'm gathering most of my information from here. So the first thing that we're going to be taking a look at is our fuel. So we're getting our block fuel from here. That's 5,308 pounds that we need to put onto the aircraft. And then the other measurement we're going to be looking at is our payload. 2.5 thousand pounds. That's going to be your cargo and passenger weight. So let's go into our weights and balances menu here, and let's get those loaded in. I'm going to switch from gallons to pounds. I mean, it really doesn't matter what this is set to because you're really interested in the ending numbers here. So what did I say for fuel? 5308, right? Yes, I did. All right, so let's check our fuel. We're at 7296. That's a lot of gas. Now, because there have been a couple of weird fuel bugs with certain aircraft too, I think it's just with the A320, I don't mind holding a little bit higher, so we're going to call it 5,400 pounds, call it square and even. And then payload, we said 2.5. So again, coming up. There we go. Looks good. Center of gravity still within limits, but we can go ahead and set it back if we want to rock that perfect weight. Everybody's just the right weight. There are no big heavy guys like me on. You know, it's easy, right? The plane's just perfect. Let's keep things as simple as we can for today. Now, we're going to be wanting to pay attention to things like our Mach here when it comes time for takeoff, but we'll come back to that later. All right, so weights are set. Fuel is set. And let's go ahead and get the aircraft turned on. So first thing, obviously, we would make sure that all circuit breakers are pushed in and closed. Now, they are not modeled in this particular version of the aircraft, so we don't really have to worry about that. I am going to clear the yoke because it makes it easier for you guys. Yes, it is an immersion breaker, but it also makes it easier for you guys to see what is going on. We're going to step on down to the primary electrical panel here first and standby battery to on. Then we're going to go our battery buttons, left battery, right battery. You want to make sure the bus tie is closed. Closed means that it is connecting. Notice where the hash lines are. They're connected to closed. Okay, what this does is your batteries and your APU and external power, for example, only power one bus. So by setting the bus tie to closed, it is actually connecting the two circuits, providing electricity to both buses. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and keep moving here. Now, at this point, we would check our ECAS, but again, much of this stuff, unfortunately, is not yet modeled, but just stay with me here. We would check the ECAS, make sure we have good battery voltage, monitor for any engine warnings or performance issues that we need to be aware of at engine start. We would check for any errors recorded on the previous flight. And then at this point now, we can go ahead and move to the back behind the throttle panel here, and we're going to start our APU. So we're going to kick that on over to start. We're going to monitor our APU run percentage. You can see there's the RPMs at 30% and climbing. The APU in this aircraft does start rather quickly, so that is always a nice thing. While we're waiting, we can go ahead and hit Bravo on our keyboard, or the B key, and set our current altimeter for Salt Lake City. It looks like we're at 3007 today. And we are at now at 100% on that APU. So let's come on back down to our electrical panel. And at this point, we're going to take our APU Gen. We're going to click it down once to reset and then bring it online. All right, with the APU online now, I did find out with private jets, most private jets, I know this sounds weird, but most private jets do not use external power even when available. The APU provides just, more than enough power to get everything all turned on and set, and it's actually cheaper than, getting the external power cart connected and things like that. So for most situations, external power is actually not used on the private jets. All right, so cockpit controls, we would have those set and trimmed out. Now, here's where this things get interesting. Now we have to set our trims. Okay, so the drag here is, it looks like in Sim Update 5 or sometime after, So what we used to do with this particular aircraft in order to determine what the current elevator or stabilizer trim was, is we would turn the tooltips on just long enough to mouse over this, and then we would be able to see, oops, what the hell did I just hit? Oh, something I didn't want to. And we would be able to see what the current trim setting is. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. You turn the tooltips on and it just says that that's the trim control. It doesn't actually tell you what the trim setting is. So unfortunately, there isn't any way on this aircraft to see what the trim is set to. Although, you know what? I wonder, what about if we go to that external view? Does it tell us? Fuel, AOA. Trim, yes. Okay, so we can still do this. This is another workaround for the moment, but if you hit, all right, so end on your keyboard, the keyboard button that says end. If you type that, it should take you to this view by default. And here we have our trim setting. Now what we're going to do is we're going to need our center of gravity, that Mach number that we looked at. So let's see here, Mach percent is 31.63% is our center of gravity. So then we're going to grab our chart here, and we're going to see 31 right about here, give or take, meets this line. We're going to be nose down about 4.5 degrees, which is actually pretty common that I have found. So I'm just going to use my trim hat here. Okay, so it looks like we only get solid numbers, so call it 4, we'll call it good. I can live with that. All right, so at least now we know what our trim setting is. It's better than nothing. So let's move on forward and continue on with our checklist at this point. All right, so trims are set. Now let's go ahead and walk through the engine start process. So parking brake is set. Wheel chocks are removed. Cabin door or curtain is closed and stowed. Passenger briefing complete. Seats, pedals, seat belts are all set. Seatbelt button sign would be up top. Unfortunately, it is non-operational, but there's where it would be if we could. ECAS has been checked. No errors or concerns to be addressed prior to engine start. Recog lights, let's go ahead and bring it on. How did ATC get turned on? Anyway, clear behind the aircraft. We did do a walk around. Everything's checked and good. Fuel shutoff valve. Let's go ahead and come on down. You have to give me a second. I got to remember which button I pushed it on. So here is our fuel shutoff valve. We're going to go ahead and just give that a tap and open it. All right, that is required in order for us to be able to start this particular bird. All right, fuel shutoff valve is set. Let's come up top. We're going to turn our beacon light on, which is our anti-collision light, and we're going to arm the emergency exit lights as well. All right, now for the fun part. Let's start our aircraft. First, we're going to tap our run button. We're going to monitor the N2 percentage, looking for about 8%. Once we get to 8%, open the engine start door and tap the run button. Then we can close the seal again, or the cover, seal. And we'll sit here and monitor until the engine is stable at idle. All right, and now let's rinse and repeat for the left engine. Again, coming on back, selecting the engine starter, moving forward, monitoring for 8% on N2. There we go. Open the engine cover and selecting run and closing the cover. Returning to monitor until engine is at idle. And with both engines at idle, we are now ready to complete the electrical startup. So, where was I on our checklist? I'm trying to make sure I follow everything perfectly here. All right, so now it's time to set our left gen to reset, and then turn left gen on, rinse and repeat with the right engine, right gen on, and open the bus ties. Again, this separates the link between the two ties as they are now being powered by their own generators. And now we can go to the APU gen and select off. Return to the back panel here and set our APU itself to off. And now the aircraft should be operating under the generator powers provided by the engines. And let's double check everything else. Still good. Yep. All right. So at this point now, we are ready to enter in our flight plan into the FMS. Then we will get our speed numbers entered in, and we will be ready to get this aircraft ready for taxi. So let's move on downward. All right, let's start getting our flight plan configured here. So first we're going to go to the flight plan menu. We're going to add origin. We're going to put in our current location, Salt Lake City. We're going to add our destination, Tucson International. And now let's take a look at some procedures. So we're going to set up our departure. I don't think we're actually using one. Oh, yes we are. There it is right there. I was wondering. I've never seen a SID written like that. Huh. All right. Hey, those are my initials. Anyway, it's going to be a good flight. That's a good luck charm, right? All right. And so there it is. And runway 16 right is what we've got today for our departure runway. Hit load. Okay, let's go back. And then we're going to go ahead and set up the arrival now. We are coming in on the Dingo 5. I doubt we're using the GBN. Looks like we're using the Pixar. Or Pixar. I always get those wrong, so there's no telling. And I believe 29 right is what we wanted today. So we got those. And now let's set up our en route. I'm going to hold off onto the approach for right now. We'll load the approach in as we start our descent. Excuse me. All right, so next we have our flight plan. So we're going from the MLF to direct to Bravo Charlie Echo, jumping onto the J11 airway, going to Corker, and then from there direct to Pixar, Phoenix R, PXR. So let's go ahead and add this. So we're going to go and add en route waypoint. Insert waypoint. And direct from MLF, we are going to Bravo Charlie Echo. And hit enter. From Bravo Charlie Echo, we're going to load airway. That's our entry point. Jumping onto the J11, and we are exiting at the PX Corker. Sorry. Huh. Interesting. I wonder why we aren't just going direct to. Well, whatever. That works. All right, and we'll hit load airway. Okay, and then let's move on down. And finally, we're going to add another en route waypoint and hold thought. Back that up. No, we're not, because from there we're exiting at Corker and going direct to Pixar, which is already here. So at this point, our flight plan is complete. We'll use our VNAV once we are airborne and at our cruise. Then we'll set up the VNAV information. I have found that it gets really buggy if you try to set this up before you fly. Okay, so wait till you're up at your cruise altitude. And today we are cruising up at, let's go up and find it, 45,000 feet. So let's go ahead and move on. So the flight plan is entered. Now we need to set up our speed bugs. So we're going to go to our speed bugs here, and this is where we need to bring our checklist back in because we're going to need some charts here. So what we're going to be looking at is our takeoff weight. Okay, so let's actually pull that up real quick. So here we go. Takeoff weight, we're looking at 31,300 pounds. So then we're going to come to our chart here. Let me see if I can zoom this in a bit for you guys. There we go. That's better. So there we go. 28,000 to 32,000 is the range that we're looking for, and here are our V speeds. So we have V1 at 109 knots, rotate 112, V2 at 124, max takeoff speed at 185 knots. So VFTO, guys, basically means that you need to be wheels up at 185 knots. You need to get those wheels off the ground. Okay? So V1, 109 knots. Bug it. V rotate at 112 knots. Bug it. And V2 at 124 knots. Bug it and set 185. This should always be 185, the VFTO. All right, so we have speed bug set. We have our altimeter set. We have our flight plan set. We have the aircraft powered on and ready to roll. We can move back to the flight plan page. Now it's just a matter of setting our initial configuration for the autopilot system, and we'll be ready for taxi. So, without further delay, let me see if I have a... Can't remember if I do or not. I guess not. I thought I had a camera that took me over there, but no, I don't. I'll be darned. Okay, well, we'll just come up top and do it. So, flight directors 1 and 2 are on. Now, we're going to be using flight level change. This is where this gets a little interesting. So first we're going to set from speed from FMS over to manual. And that is because the speed that goes with the FMS just doesn't work real well. I always fly the longitude on manual speed. A, I like having the control over it. B, it just doesn't give me any issues. So until things change, that's how we're going to rock and roll this thing. We're going to set our initial speed to 185 knots as we just discussed. So we're going to go into flight level change, and we're going to speed that up to 185 knots. Once we get airborne and are stable, we will accelerate to 250 knots to 10,000 feet. So there's 185 knots for our takeoff speed. We're not going to trigger our nav system yet. Once we get to the runway, we'll align with the runway heading. We do need to set our FMS still to make sure we're on the CDI. We're going to set our initial altitude to 10,000. All right, and we are ready to move on. So next we're going to come down to the pilot TSC here. This affects the PFD screen. So these two here will control the MFD, and then this one controls the co-pilot PFD, and this one is the pilot PFD. So we're going to check our nav source and make sure we switch over to the FMS for takeoff. So that way nav mode is ready to go. And that is it, guys. We are ready for taxi. All right, so let's come up top for a second here. We're going to turn that taxi light on. You can turn your wing lights on if you choose. Primarily used for night operations. I just like turning them on because it's fun to push buttons. Being completely honest. And now, all we need to do is take a look at Navigraph and see where we are at. Holy moly, that's going to suck. Okay, so here is where we currently are. We need to taxi all the way up Kilo to Kilo 9er, cross runway 17 via Sierra, take Sierra over to Hotel, Hotel down to Foxtrot at Hotel 8, take Foxtrot over to Alpha, Alpha taxi to Alpha 11 to runway 16 right. That is terrible. Ideally, it would be nice to use runway 16 left, but in the interest of keeping things realistic, we will make that god-awful taxi. So, let's just bite and grit down on it, and we will taxi and get our butts moving here. So, without any further delay, before taxi, we want to make sure the parking brake is released. Make sure spoilers are retracted. Flaps are also retracted for taxi. All right, my friends, let us get this aircraft out of here. I always forget to move my rudder pedals up to the screen before I get going. I'm not using my head tracker today. The camera is starting to give me a little bit of trouble, so just got things getting goofy all over the place lately. So let's see where we're at here again. So we're facing that, so we need to turn to the right. So we're going to add a slight power till we start to roll. There we go. And this is how she's rolling at idle, so keep that in mind. Literally, once you get her moving, be ready to check those brakes. All right, guys, so we are on the taxi here, and We actually have changed our runways. As I was getting ready to taxi out, I decided, you know what, I should probably check ATIS. I saw an aircraft taking off in the opposite direction of which we were going to do, so I was like, I'll check ATIS. So, unfortunately, unfortunately and fortunately, let's hold short here. Just line up here for just a second. 34 right is our departing runway. Let me set the parking brake for a second so I can catch you guys up to where we're at. So after checking ATIS, determined obviously that we had the wrong departure runway. That was my fault. I was assuming Simbrief was correct. Never assume anything. We all know what that means when you assume, right? So I went to the procedures here, and we did have to change our departure to the Arch Z1 and our runway to 34 right. The MLF transition is still correct. So other than that, the flight plan. Goodness, I got the hiccups on top of everything else. The flight plan has remained the same. So that makes it very nice. And you can see here what we had to do. So we were over here and we just took hotel and walked her on over. All right. So now let's get ready for takeoff. So before we join the runway, I'm going to go ahead and turn those landing lights on, turn that taxi light off, turn the pulse light on, and double check everything else is good to go. Let's release that parking brake and get ourselves lined up with the runway. We're also going to set flaps too. Give those brakes a tap sometimes. When you manipulate the camera, sometimes you have to tap the brakes to get them to actually let go. Alright, let's line her up at the center of the runway. Looking good. Alright, now, so we have our flaps set, brakes are released. Let's go ahead and arm the spoilers in the event of a rejected takeoff. Now, first thing we can do is we can arm our toga. So I have that mapped to my throttle. So I've armed toga. Alright, now what we would normally do is arm the auto throttle, power up to 50%, and then power forward and the auto throttle will take over. But because of limitations in the simulator, we're actually going to do the opposite. We're going to power up to 50% on the engines, then arm the auto throttle, and from there, the airplane will take over speed control. Okay? All right. So, let's make sure we are good to go. I do want to arm flight level change. I think that just messed with my speed. It did. So I'm going to set my speed bug back to 185 knots. Okay, let's back out, and let's do it. So, brakes released, there's 50%-ish, arming the auto throttle, airplane's in control of the speed, we're out of here. Remember, we're looking for 112 knots on rotate. There it is, rotating. Come on, baby. Gear up. 20 knots past V2, which is right about there. Flaps coming up. Let her stabilize here. Increasing our speed to 250 knots. Got a little fast. We'll adjust that in just a second. Arm that autopilot. Autopilot active. I'm going to zoom in a bit here so we can get a better idea on our speed. We're a little hot there. Let's bring that down. Oh, there we go. Let's do a quick flight check, controls check. Flaps are up. Good. Let's make sure that landing gear came up. It did. Good. Let's turn our pitot heats on and the anti-ice. We're going up to 45,000 feet. It's going to be quite the hike. Set our altitude bug. We're going to go up to 19,000 from here. And let's do flight level change again. Set our speed bug, 250 knots. This thing climbs like a bullet. And we're clear of the runway. Let's go to nav mode. 10,000 feet, lights off. We're above 10,000 feet, so we're going to increase our climb speed as well up to 270 knots. And go 290 knots if you want to do a speed climb. Next alteration will be at 18,000 feet, where we change from barometric pressure to standard. And from there, we'll continue our climb up to flight level 450. As we reach about Mach 0.7 or so, we will switch our speed from indicated to Mach. You see how fast this thing climbs, dude. Just skyrockets. Just flies. This is one of the definite fun parts about this aircraft. She just takes off, man. (18,000 feet, switching to standard pressure, just using the B key on the keyboard. Let's change, oops, wrong one. Gotta set my altitude bug. I'm gonna stage this up slowly so we can pay attention to what the weather's doing to the aircraft as far as temperature. All right, and let's go back into flight level change. Off she goes. Just notice I'm not getting any outside temperature readings anymore. And I did not turn on our transponder. So we're going to go TA. Oops. Oh, come on. There. Shame on me. There we go. Right there. Negative 19 degrees. That's a good sign. We'll see what happens when we get to altitude. All right, so far it's been uneventful takeoff. The one thing I did forget to turn on, guys, I'm guilty of, forgot to turn the transponder on. So I've got a transponder turned on. I've got the traffic system turned on. Flight plan's proceeding as normal. No issues yet. Approaching 35,000 feet. Outside air temperature right now, definitely declining rapidly. We're at negative 34 degrees Celsius. So as to be expected, I'm going to continue. Oh, what did I just do? I just did something I didn't want to do. What the heck? It set the simulator rate. Dude, come on. Knock it off. I don't even know how that happened. Like, literally have no clue. Alright, so anyway, let's go to 45,000 feet. We're going to take us all the way up to cruise at this point. And I'll let you guys know once we get there. But so far, everything's running very nicely. I haven't had any issues whatsoever, knock on wood. Let's go ahead and disarm those spoilers. But everything's on par so far, so we'll see what happens. The other thing I did forget to do, just so you guys are aware, is when we lined up with the runway, I did not select align the heading bug with the runway. I'll be honest, a little sidetracked in the aspect that I'm watching for bugs, crashes, things like that. So need to pay closer attention to my checklist through the remainder of the flight. But just hoping everything goes well at this point. So far, knock on wood, like I said, everything's been great. So we'll see what happens. I'll see you guys when we get to cruise. Alright, so I was waiting for this to happen so you guys could see this. We're overspeeding the aircraft because we need to switch our indicated. So we're just going to give this a tap, and that switches over to Mach. Okay, and now we're going to take our Mach speed down to Mach 0.80 for the climb. Okay, so I want you guys to see that impact if you don't switch it over. Okay, you need to really watch for that. Max cruise speed for this or our cruise profile is Mach 0.82. So we're going to climb at Mach 0.80, and then once we get to our cruise altitude, we'll accelerate to Mach 0.82. But we'll see what happens. Sometimes even that forces me into overspeed, so we'll see what goes on. All right, so I'll catch you guys in just a couple of minutes. We're almost there. All right, so we are approaching our cruise altitude. I'm going to go ahead and accelerate. I'm not more sure why we're at Mach 0.78. But when our target's Mach 0.8, but we're going to go ahead and go to Mach 0.82. Hopefully we reach it without issue. But we'll let that speed up, and at this point, we are now ready to take a look at VNAV. So let's work on that while the aircraft sets its speed here. So we're going to go back to our flight plan. We're going to go to VNAV. Now what we need to do is first we need to set our altitudes. In order to do that, we're going to have to back up actually, and we're going to find our descent point. Okay, and what that is the point at which we change our altitudes. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. So we're going to look at Tucson. Oops. Let me pull this up here. Oh, come on. We're looking at the star. We're coming on the Dingo 5. And there's the Pixar. Or Phoenix, I guess is what all it is. It's just weird. Well, it's the Phoenix, not the Pixar. All right, it's Phoenix. What's the point of the R then? Anyway, I digress. So let's see here. What if any altitude restrictions we have here? So at Phoenix, I'm not seeing anything. Dingo 5, Dingo 5 by Tucson Tower, Meva, turn heading. I'm not seeing any altitude restrictions, which is interesting. Oh, what was that? Oh, transition altitude. That's all that is. So 8,000 to 6,700. Phoenix. Okay, so 8,000. So we're going to set 8,000 as our target altitude. Other than that, we don't have any other restrictions that we have to worry about for our flight plan here. So I'm going to come down and find the Phoenix VOR, and we're just going to type 8,000 feet, press enter. This is actually a really easy one. And just let it continue on, and what it will do is calculate anything before then that's necessary, but it doesn't look like we have much. So that's easy. So we're going to go to VNAV, VNAV enabled, and boom, we have our time to top of descent, mercy, at 26 minutes. So, and that's actually a little bit more than that. I wonder if we're still in a speed change. Hang on a second, and I will address that and come back to you guys, because I think that I think the game speed is still increased. So the answer to that was yes, we were at 2 times normal game speed. So that explains why that countdown was going so fast. So now if we come down, go back to our flight plan, go back to VNAV here. Yeah, I was watching the second time and it was just like blowing away. So we got 23 minutes until our top of descent. So until then, guys, I will catch you in, or I'll see you then. Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Catch you guys in a minute. All right, guys. So we are coming up on our top of descent. You can see top of descent within 1 minute now flashing on the screen here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slow our speed down to Mach 0.8. I'm going to put us into VNAV mode here. And we're going to be looking at a target, it looks like, of 2,400 feet per minute. Yep. Radar contact? That's what he just said. All right, let us begin. Oh, not VNAV, sorry, vertical speed is what I meant. There we go. Oh, I forgot to set our altitude. Shame on me. All right, let's get that down. Let's go back into vertical speed. Let's get that down again. So far, everything on this flight has been really good. And we're going to get us down here. Our first target is 8,000 feet, so we're going to take it all the way down there. Almost. Locked in. All right. So, see, we're descending at 20, looks like we're actually more like 2,300 feet per minute. So the idea is to get our blue descent or vertical speed indicator down to the purple vertical speed target. So we could come down just a hair. There we go. It's closer. And you may have to adjust this a couple of times in the beginning. But after a while, you get pretty on point here. And that is it. So here's how this is going to look like from here. Typically around the late 20s, early 30s of thousands of feet, we're going to start looking at possibly overspeeding the aircraft again. So we're going to switch over to indicated airspeed again, right around that point, between 35,000, 27,000 feet. Sometimes it varies. And then we'll be descending down at 290 knots, okay? And then we will slow it down to 270 knots as we start to overspeed again. You're going to see that speed change. You'll be monitoring your tape here. But right about 18,000 feet, we'll be down to about 270 knots. And we need to make sure we're at 250 knots by 10,000 feet and then following any speed restrictions as we come into the airspace. So we'll be reducing our speed. Obviously, by 8,000 feet, we're probably going to be looking more like, 210 knots at that point. So I'll see you guys as we make each one of these changes, but they'll be short clips, so make sure you guys stay with me. All right. All right, so right here's a perfect example. You can see here we're approaching 290 knots, right about 300 knots. We're overspeeding the aircraft. So this is typically when I will switch over from indicated back, or from Mach back to indicated airspeed. And then I'm going to slow us down to 270 knots. And from here, we'll continue this all the way down to 18,000 feet. Once we get to about 18,000, we will start monitoring more closely. And actually, more like 12,000 is typically when I reduce down to 250 knots for the 10,000 foot restriction. And then at 18,000 feet, we'll make sure to set our barometric pressure, and I'll set it again when we get to 18,000 feet. I'll typically set it again when we get to about 3,000 feet to make sure we have the correct approach altimeter. All right, so I'll catch you guys in just a few minutes here. All right, so we are passing through 18,000 feet. Let's go ahead and set that altimeter pressure. And apparently it is 29902. We're going to give it a few more seconds. All right, far out. Can't go wrong there. Now you can see we're getting a little steep on the descent rate, so now we're going to pull it up a bit. All right, the other thing we can start doing is locking in our approach. So let's get down to our FMC again. Let's go to flight plan, procedures, find the approach. And we are coming in for the, let's see here. We want the ILS 29er, right? Are we doing ILS or are we doing RNAV? Looks like we're doing RNAV. So let's see here. We're doing RNAV 29er, right? And our transition, let's come over here to our approach plates. And let's find that 29er right. Let's see what my transition is. Joachim or Dingo. We want the Yankee. Helps when I pick the right chart. We're going to be using the Joachim. So if we take a look here. Okay, let me back this out a little bit. You can see the Dingo's way over here. We're coming in from the northeast here, so we're going to come in over down this way, pick up the Joachim here, and then come in. Or Joaquin, I have no idea. Every time I try to say one of those, it's wrong. So let's load that up. Let's hit load. We're not going to worry about activating it just yet. What are you doing? You're kidding me. Plane? Come on, man. Apparently, we didn't want to do that. You got to be kidding me. Activate leg to waypoint. Go. Don't ask me why it did that, simply because I programmed the approach. All right. So, no worries. All's well that ends well, and that ended well. All right. We are also down to 13,000 feet, so it's time to slow the aircraft down. So let's get her down to 250 knots. It's important now that we start talking about speed restrictions. So anything below 250 knots, we're going to want flaps 1. Below 230 knots, we're going to want flaps 2. And then at 180 knots, we want flaps 3 and gear down. So just keep that in mind as we start working towards the approach. I have no idea where it was going right there. It's almost like it activated the approach. And the next thing that we should probably start talking about here, well, yeah, I mean, it's close enough, is we're going to have to start talking about approach speeds. So let's take a quick peek at that. And it works the same way that we were looking at our takeoff speeds. Let's scroll down here. And a link to this checklist will be down in the description below. It's done by a good buddy of mine, Grim. Fantastic checklist. Works absolutely great as a quick reference guide. So let's see here. We're looking for max weight. We should probably grab that first, then look at the checklist. Sort of makes more sense, right? So we're at 29,130 pounds, right? So let's see what our variation is here. 29,500 pounds. So we're looking at 27,500 pounds. So we're going to be between this range here, but closer to the 29,000 range, right? So you can do a little bit of interpolating here and try to come up with the exact numbers here. But as you can see here, talking about a 4-knot difference here. So I'm probably going to do 115 knots and like 126 knots as my speeds. So let's come down to our speed bugs for a second. We can do that from the Pilot TSC. And, oh, did I hit the wrong one? I did. We want speed bugs, landing. So our approach speed, again, is in this case going to be looking at 126 knots. And our reference speed is, what did I say? We're looking at 114 knots. Let's do that. Okay. And let's throw those bugs on. Good to go there. We can set our minimums. We're just going to be using the standard 200 feet of the radar altimeter. So we're going to go radar and hit enter. And we can see right there, minimums are set. And that should be Phoenix that we're looking at over here. And we're coming up to our target speed, 8,000. Below 10,000 feet, landing lights should be on by now. You know what? We might have actually picked the wrong transition looking at this more closely now. Let's pull this back here a second. No, alright, that still works. So, the Dingo would have taken us out over here and then back into the airport, where now we're going to go to Baser and come around this way. I still like that plan a lot better. Alright. So we'll lock in at 8,000 here. Let's take a look at our flight plan. So once we reach Baser, we'll activate the approach mode if it doesn't activate automatically. So we got a few minutes yet. Now we're just going to sort of kick back and wait for everything to come into play here. Wind speed's looking pretty good. Looks like we're at 9 knots so far, but we'll see what it's like when we get closer to Tucson. What we'll do is we'll take our wind coefficient here, or wind speed, and adjust our speed accordingly. So for example, if we do turn into the wind and we're looking at 9 knot headwind, we would increase our reference speed by 9 knots. Alright, so I'll see you guys in a few here. We got quite a bit to go here. Like I said, at Baser, I'll activate the approach phase, and that should take us over to Joaquim or Joachim, whatever it is this time that I'm probably saying wrong. Alright, guys. Alright, guys, so we have officially started the approach. The approach phase did activate automatically, so no concerns there. That was good to see. So from here, it's going to get going pretty quick once we get to Joachim here. And then from that point on, we'll start changing aspect and speed rather quickly. So just hang tight here for a few more minutes. Once we start coming around the bend, that's when we'll start having some fun. So looking at the approach plate here, we can see though at Joachim we're supposed to be at 7,800 feet. So that's the only alteration we are going to make here. And so we're just going to take our altitude very gently, kick it down. That way we don't change too fast. Go to vertical speed and just a nice steady descent. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Alright, and I'll see you guys as we start coming around the corner. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. Okay, so cross your fingers, guys. We just had a crash to desktop. So I've reloaded the plane roughly where we were. We're on Baser. We're now on our way back to the approach. We're heading to Joachim again. We're coming up on 7,800 feet. We have to continue our climb here. It's been interesting trying to get this back where we need to be, so I'm going to set us back up. Hopefully all goes well. And I'll see you guys just as planned as we get ready to make our change onto the, or our turn onto the actual approach. But I think I've got everything figured out. Transponder, looks like it's set automatically. At least it did something correctly. Just going through a quick sweep here. By the way, if you ever run into a crash to desktop in the Cessna Citation Longitude, when you do an air start to the Longitude, get ready for this. It starts with the engine off. Both engines were off. I managed to glide it down safely low enough while doing an air start, and was able to get the engine started fast enough to get her back up and running. So averted a crisis there, but just be ready for that. If you do an air start in the Longitude, check the engines first thing and make sure they're on. If they're not, make sure you descend slow enough, or fast enough I should say, that you can maintain about 200 knots, 180 knots, etc. You know, somewhere around there, and then just get through the engine startup process. I started both of them at the same time. I literally opened these doors, clicked 1 and 2, Made sure the fuel valve was on, hit run on both, and the big indicator is you'll come down here and you'll see both of these are on stop. If you see that, get going, get those engines started. So figured I'd give you guys the heads up, but again, we did some of that pilot crap and hopefully averted a mess. So we'll see what happens. I'll catch you guys when we get to Joachim again. Alright guys, as we are starting to approach our turn here, we're about halfway there, so I got about 20 miles or so before the turn. Well, actually about 30 miles. I wanted to show you guys something that sort of came to mind, which, by the way, I'm sort of shocked that we're supposed to be this well. Never mind, I descended a little fast in the chaos, but that's all right. I wanted to show you guys something that you can use as sort of a workaround to some of this that will take some of the weight off in the event of a crash to desktop, and that is Sky Dolly. A link for this is down in the description below. This is a fantastic recording software. Use it for replays and things like that. But what it does do is you can, once you hit record, so watch this here. So hit record, and I hit stop, you see it created an entry. Cessna Citation Longitude 01 livery says where we're at. Departure from base here, blah, 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 arrival time. Shows where we're headed, okay? Now, what I can do is, if I were to, unfortunately, run into a crash to desktop at this point here, is I can hit that play button, and it will load me back into this particular position. I will literally spawn right here facing this direction, etc. So, like I said, in the chaos of trying to restart, or I should say start the engines, and all that other goodies, I descended too quickly. So we're a little low for where we're at, but that's all right. Seriously, lightning? There is no lightning here right now. But anyway, it's a nice workaround. And the nice thing about this is I believe it remembers pretty much all of the aircraft variables. So it may even solve the fact that the engines aren't started once we load into the sim. So I wanted to show you guys that cool tool. Again, it's free. Link down in the description below. You can find it on the FlightSim.2's website. It's a really handy piece of software and really makes a big difference for us in what we're doing. All right, so we should be coming around. I want to say the turn's going to be before we make that mountain pass, unless it's on the other side of it. Could be on the other side of it. But anyway, so I want to show you guys that real quick, and I'll catch you guys as we come around again. All right, so as we start making our turn around the bend here, I am going to verify our barometric pressure is still correct. Nope, 2981. We're going to set our altitude, down to 2,600 feet for a runway elevation. So actually, I'm going to go 4,000 for escape altitude, or missed approach. Let's see here. Let me double check that. Looking at the missed approach, climb to 6,500 is missed approach altitude. Let's go ahead and set that in the box. Also, on the restart, anti-ice was off. I did turn that back on. And emergency locator transmitter was not armed, but I actually can't remember if I armed that or not. Okay, so assuming that we are back where we're supposed to be, we're going to start slowing this plane down to 210 knots. Remember what I said, anything below 250 knots, we want flaps 1. So flaps 1 coming down. And anything below 230 knots, we want flaps 2. Flaps 2 coming down. I'm all discombobulated now. I feel like the whole plane is in shambles right now, and it's really not. I think I've just about got everything under control. I'm checking my landing procedures here. Approach landing data is entered. I did make sure to set our minimums again. I got our speed bug entries entered again. Passenger briefing, seatbelt signs, landing gear, okay, good. Exterior lights are back on. I double check that. Speed brakes, there we go, speed brakes. Let's arm those speed brakes, and we're also going to start the approach mode here. So let's go into approach mode. Okay, I think we're caught up. I think we're good to go. I'm like super nervous about it. I feel like something's gonna pop off here at the last second and mess me up. All right, and by VED2, we're supposed to be at a maximum of 8,100 feet. Desired is 300. So actually, let's go into vertical speed mode, and let's just start descending at least down to 6,500. We're going to just do this nice, easy 1,000 feet per minute. And we can always reset our current altitude. So I'm going to select our altitude bug, and I'm going to set it down to the 53. Well, let's go to 4,000. I don't want to be too high. Maintaining 210 knots for now. Well, by SAXI, we want to be, let's do it that way. Mandatory 5,300 feet by ATOG. So let's disregard that. Let's kick that back up, and let's go to 5,300. Let's see, are we descending fast enough is the question. I think so. It's going to be close. But I think 1,000 feet per minute should work. And so just so you guys can see it, what I'm doing, I deleted all my other entries. I'm doing a record again and hitting stop. So it creates the entry. I'm just going to delete the previous one. And now if I need to, I can just, if the sim crashes, I can load this up. And you want to jump into the aircraft, but then you just tap that load button and it'll take you to this location, this heading, etc. It's not going to remember all your flight plan information, but it should remember, I believe it remembers the aircraft's current state. So flaps, gear, etc. Engine start, whatnot. So should. I believe that's correct. All right, so we're actually looking really good here. If anything, we're probably descending a little quickly. So I'm going to reduce that to about 600 feet per minute. Looks about right. Like I said, at SAXI, we need to be at 4,400 feet. So I should still have my altitude bug set. Yeah, so descended a little fast. So I'm actually going to reduce this a little further to, say, 200 feet per minute for the moment. I will admit, for the most part, I do believe the clouds have been restored. They still look a little washed out in areas, but nothing like it was. Like that. I don't like those at all. I'm not sure what's happening there. I think we're supposed to be looking at high altitude clouds, but it's really hard to tell. It's very fuzzy. But for the most part, I will say that has been restored. I'm definitely much happier with the clouds than I was previously. And the clouds are a big thing. I mean, you know, you wouldn't think something so silly would make such a big impact, but I really believe it does. Because they can really add a lot to the scenery. Alright, so we're looking good. Looks like we're right on target at this point. Guys, feel free to skip ahead to the landing if you'd like. I'm going to keep the recording going all the way through from here on out just because of... Don't want to keep making changes to the PC. I have no idea what caused the previous crash. I was just flying and it dumped. I thought maybe it was loading into the Tucson scenery, but I mean, we're here. I didn't remove any mods. I didn't remove any add-ons or anything like that. It's just working. So my concern is a memory leak, but I didn't notice any PC degradation. See, typically when memory starts to peak, typically, not always, but typically, you'll start seeing a performance loss. You know, weird stuttering, you might see some lagging, you know, things like that. Let's double check our barometric pressure again. Oh, 299.1 now. Got massive changes here. That we didn't fly very far to have such significant changes. I'm hoping that's not a bug. We'll check it again at about... oh, we got an aircraft out there. It's like multiplayer. He's lagging. That was a pretty steep turn for our passengers, so we can turn the bank limiter on to limit the bank angle. Looks like an A320 rolling in. Can't tell if he's coming into Tucson or not. Alright, let's see how we're looking here. So we are at a togue. We got our 43 or our altitude correct. So altitude bug selected. Coming down to 4,400. I'm going to hit that vertical speed and we're going to start descending because we need to get our butts down. We're way above the glide slope now. Which is interesting because it said that at a togue we had to be at 5,300. The chart says mandatory. So I'm not understanding how we are so far below. Or above it, excuse me. I mean, you can see the diamond way down there. So something's not right. All right, but let's start slowing this aircraft down. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go gear down. Oh, come on. Gear down. We're going to go full flaps. We're going to get that speed down. We're going to start looking at our... oh, God dang it. Start looking for our reference speed. So we're going to take her down to... I believe it was 128 knots is what we said. Come on, baby. Come down. Time to slow down. Let's get that taxi light turned on. We should lock onto the glide slope here. Oh, now we're above it. Okay, that's weird. All right, well, it's acquired. Remember, we're on an RNAV approach, so we're not using the localizers, it's using GPS. But we are locked. So at this point, we can set our escape altitude, or missed approach altitude. I don't know why I always got the escape altitude. 6,500 feet. I'm going to double check our barometric pressure once again. Okay, 299.1 looks like still accurate. Slow us down about 124 knots. A 7-knot crosswind. I'm going to start our recording again on SkyDolly. This is showing us dropping a little bit below the glide slope. Let's double check our spoilers are armed. They are indeed. .500 feet, disengaging the autopilot, taking the plane. Now, very often, you have to trim the junk out of it. It likes to trim nose up when you disengage the autopilot. I'm not sure why, so be ready for that. Pretty sure that's a bug. All right, I am now disengaging auto throttle. Come on, baby, come on back. Looking for that reference speed. Throttle's to idle. Looking for 3 degrees of flare. Oof. Not one of my best landings. Not one of my best. Reverse was open. Getting off the runway. Flaps coming up. Let's hold her short here for a second. And let's get those pulse lights off. Landing lights off. Definitely had sort of a rough ride getting her to trim out. So, like I said, what happened is when I disengaged the autopilot, the trim went extremely nose high. So I was trimming darn near the entire way down. It still wanted to trim nose high, and every time I let off that down pressure, it was going nose up, nose up, nose up. So it made the flare a little too high. I got concerned about the flare in the end as I noticed that, and then we drifted to the left side, left of center line. So but it wasn't terrible. Let's make sure we didn't strike. It's a little bit of a roll there, not too bad. You can see that's where I kicked off to the left side of the runway. There's the reversers coming out. Got back on center line-ish. And then exited the runway. So not too bad. Not too bad at all. Alright guys, well, that was an exciting ending. Normally I'd walk us through the shutdown and everything, but I think I'm just going to call it here before anything else can go wrong on this flight. It started out really well. I mean, it really wasn't bad. It was just the ending. The ending got a little rough. Lot of chaos when I had to relaunch the sim. Lot of chaos. Like I said, that... oh, darn it. I was using the camera. With the engines not being started with an air start, that was quite frustrating. But luckily we caught it. No harm, no foul. All's well that ends well, right? So as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you guys learned something, at the very least some tips and tricks and some situations that you can get yourself out of. Make sure you guys use that Sky Dolly software as a safeguard. You know, just periodically hit that record button and create an entry. Just so that way, if you do get a crash at desktop, you can at least, you don't lose your entire flight. Just remember that when you do load back in, you will need to re-enter your flight plan. You will need to reconfigure your aircraft. You will need to, you know, set a lot of the controls back up again. But it's still better than having to walk through the entire flight all over again. So anyway, just think about things like that, guys, and I will see you in the next one, folks. Have a good weekend, guys.